Here's a story about how a medieval logician's theorizing about cannonballs accidentally invalidated a famous proof of the existence of God. The story starts with Aristotle's physics, on which any motion has to be explained by a persistent cause. There has to be a cause present that keeps the thing moving. So for example, if you're turning a key in a lock, if your hand stops, the key stops moving and so does the lock. So in this picture, there's nothing like Newtonian inertia. Things need to be kept going in order to keep going. Now, almost 2,000 years after Aristotle, we have Aquinas presenting as one of his famous 5 ways of proving the existence of God, the argument from motion. So the central claim is that the cosmos is moving, right? You have these great interlocking spheres of the Ptolemaic universe, and because these are rotating, you have to explain the rotation by positing the existence of a prime mover, some first mover that's keeping things going. So that's the first way that Aquinas undertakes to prove the existence of God. He's got 4 other ways in the so-called Quinque Viae, but we're going to focus on this one. Now, this theory of motion faces an important theoretical problem, and that problem is, for example, when an arrow leaves the bowstring, why does it keep flying? You might think that once it leaves the bowstring, the cause of its motion is absent and so it should just fall to the ground, but instead, of course, it keeps on flying. And the standard Aristotelian response to this is to say that air rushes out from in front of the arrow, in behind, and then pushes it to keep it going. I mean, it was never going to be the most popular aspect of Aristotle's physics, but it is kind of a fringe issue, right? Now here's a key thing about this theoretical problem, is it's theoretical. It's not as though knowing how arrows fly once they've left the bow makes you any better at archery. At least it's not obvious, right? You can be just as good at hitting your target without knowing what makes arrows fly. But with the introduction of cannons, we enter into a new period of medieval warfare, and people start thinking about ballistics. The main problem is, how do you trace the arc that a cannonball makes across the sky and know accordingly how much gunpowder to use, what way to point the gun, and that sort of thing. It's important to note, by the way, that movies depicting cannons being fired at walls are more inaccurate. Usually cannons were fired over the walls and down into the town, or city, or whatever it may be. And for this reason, it was pretty standard practice, actually, if you know that your town or city is going to come under siege, to dig up the cobblestones, because that way the cannonballs go thunk in the mud, rather than hitting the cobblestones, bouncing around and causing more damage. Now, early attempts to calculate the parabola are kind of weird. They seem to depict the cannonball as rising in a more or less steady curve and then dropping suddenly. But as some commentators have suggested, this is probably true to what it would have felt like being in a town under siege. The cannonballs would have felt like they were coming out of the sky. In any case, it's just not clear how to calculate this, whether it should be smooth, if it starts to fall, why does it start to fall, when does it start to fall, and that sort of thing. And this engineering problem is compounded by the fact that not only do we have cannons we want to shoot over there, they have cannons they want to shoot back at us, and they're working on the problem too. And it's in this context that the philosopher, mainly known for his logic and physics, John Buridan, posited what he called the impetus. This is just the Latin word for shoving, or giving something a shove. Once something gets an initial impetus, it keeps on going until something takes that away. Buridan has in mind not only arrows, but also wheels that continue to turn after they've been given a push. As he points out, there is no way to explain the rotation of a wheel like this by appealing to something going on in the surrounding air. Because the impetus wears off over time through resistance, unless the cannonball hits some kind of obstacle, it's going to come down in a relatively smooth way, which is precisely what we now, standing on the shoulders of giants, would predict. But wait a minute, what about that proof of the existence of God? Well, it seems as though it's been invalidated. The existence of motion does not entail that the mover still has to exist at all. We might compare this to an archer. It's perfectly possible to fire an arrow and die before the thing stops moving. So in fact, the proof of the existence of God, the first way of Aquinas' 5 ways, it only succeeds in proving that God has existed at some past time, which is a considerably weaker claim than the original. So that's how we start with a theoretical framework that gives you a pretty elegant proof of the existence of God, but also faces some theoretical puzzles about the motion of arrows. Those theoretical puzzles linger in the background, but then become engineering problems with the introduction of a new technology, namely cannons. And in light of those problems, a new theory is posited, which unfortunately does not have really space for the original proof. Now, Buridan recognizes that there are theological implications to his view, but he doesn't go into them. He says he'll leave them to the theologians to decide. And that's probably wise because, 1, it's dangerous enough doing theology in the Middle Ages, but 2, Buridan himself was not qualified. He never became a doctor of theology. And I can't imagine he would have won any friends for himself, any allies, if he rushed into the theology faculty and said, "Hey everyone, check it out. I just invalidated one of your favorite proofs of the existence of God." But anyway, that's what he did. Oh yeah, thanks for watching, as always, and let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Now this video was brought to you with the support of the FWO, and for details on that, see the links in the description. But I also want to give a shout out to my friend and colleague Gyula Klima. It was after a phone call with him, where we discussed some of these things, that I had the idea to get into the history of thinking about projectile motion in the first place and making this video about Buridan. And more generally, I think I'm going to be making quite a few more videos about Buridan for this channel, since he is one of the greatest logicians of all time and certainly my main area of specialty. So if you'd like to hear more specifically on that, just let me know in the comments, and otherwise, thank you, as always, for watching.